I've asked these three authors and disruptors of publishing to talk about kind of a loaded question. Are we at the beginning or the end of the publishing world? We're in an era where we create more and more content in more and more formats every day, and yet we seem to have so much stuff we never know where to start reading it, so many other ways to reach an audience, and increasingly your ability to reach an audience is the driver of whether you got a book contract. I've talked to publishers that won't talk to you unless you have 50,000 followers. That's no measure of your ability to write, and yet it is the measure of their ability to sell books. And so what I really want to ask by the end of this is, are we at the beginning or the end of publishing? Because if there's all this death happening, hopefully there's a rebirth. And so what does a publisher look like 10 years from now is the final question. And I know you guys spend a lot of time debating this online and off. So Mitch, I'm going to ask you first. Are we at the beginning or end of publishing?
I think we're probably at the end of publishing as an engine to just put stuff into the world. I think we're at the beginning of publishing in the sense of when people ask me what excites me about creating content, we live in a world where in text, images, audio, and video, you can have an idea and share it instantly for free with the world. And so I think that publish button as a way to push things out there is newer than people think. So whenever I get the whole, oh, does anyone read blogs anymore, or all that sort of stuff, I always laugh because I believe actually that publishing as an engine to share information has never been easier, and it's probably changing dramatically. I mean, if you look at the past couple of weeks and you think about the growth of Vine and then Instagram and their 15 seconds, these are all engines of publishing too. My take on it is that...
So you have 15 seconds of fame now. That's it,
well,
right?
Yeah, or 140 characters. But no, but I think that's just one divergent component of it. You have longer text and longer video too. The bigger point for me is that I think we're just beginning to define the many different ways in which we have publishing as an engine.
So was publishing in previous versions defined by the sort of one-to-many broadcast high cost of making a single version of something in economies of scale?
No, I think it was the creation of content and a way to distribute it. And I just think if you look at it from that pure perspective and think about it in the context of books, you'll struggle. If you look at it in the context of how do you take an idea and communicate it and distribute it to a world, I think we're at the very beginning stages of something that's going to get perpetually more interesting.
So what happens to traditional publishers who sort of own that one big channel?
They die. You know, I think Julien has spoken. Do you want to go? You can go.
They die.
Yeah.
They die.
Well,
their margins their means of distribution are broken down. Huge industries where you wouldn't believe what it takes to be able to get an editor to look at a book. It takes 6 months. They go through 5 drafts. It's 5 people's job. It should be reduced to a machine because it's a machine job, but there's 5 guys making $100K plus a year because they live in New York City. It's ridiculous.
But let me quantify death. I look at it in the construct of newspapers. People go, newspapers are dying. Newspapers are a very viable business. They're just not viable if you're a big monolithic media publisher who's trying to replicate a model in which there are only a couple ways in which for an advertiser to connect to an audience.
Right.
So in that sense, it sort of dies.
Do you think Andrew Sullivan is like the new newspaper with the sort of paywall sponsorship?
It's another format. So I always tell people that I would love to own the Montreal Gazette. It's a really profitable business. If you want to connect to local Anglophone Montrealers and you want to advertise to them,
over the age of 70.
It's a multi-million-dollar business still that's very viable. It's just now there's a lot of other ways to do things and to connect to them with. So it doesn't work in the construct of this big, massive organization. It works if you're comfortable in owning a business that generates several millions of dollars, then it's still good. There's always going to be a market, I think, for an editor to identify talent, to help curate it, to help build it, to help build a platform around it, and to sell that to the world. And I do think that big publishers still have a role.
So let me ask Hugh a question here. So pass him your stick for a sec. So Hugh, you built a publishing platform that says basically, I don't need no stinking editor. I'm going to go build something and it will live or die on its own. Or do you still need an editor? Mitch is saying you do.
No, so Pressbooks is a file creation mechanism. So it creates the thing you need, either the file that you send to the printer or an ebook file that you would send to Amazon or elsewhere. But I think that the process of editing of aggregating community, aggregating readership is going to continue to be absolutely important. I just think it's going to look very different. And if you look at...
so were you saying the publisher used to aggregate readership?
The
Because the ones I've talked to would tell you, no, that's the author's job.
Yeah, but I think they're absolutely wrong.
And
if they're not able to do better than the author, then why would the author go to them for what is essentially a contract job of editing and designing a cover and distribution? And the reason is that a publisher that's good is going to be able to connect with more readers than an author will on his own. The job of a publisher is to make public content. That's the definition of the word. And I think what we're seeing is as all the tools for making public change, publishers are still kept in a pretty traditional place right now. And what we're going to see is just the emergence of totally new forms and much more effective forms of aggregating communities around readership. And that's fundamentally the most important job of the publisher.
So Julien, you've done the big book trust agents publisher thing, and then you've done the Seth Godin Domino sort of experimental stuff.
Yeah, you could call it almost self-publishing.
Right.
Yeah.
So what was the biggest difference between those two experiences?
One of them was a New York Times bestseller, so it made me famous or something, and then the other one reached 300,000 people.
Right.
So, I mean, you just got to take your pick. If you go and you get a traditional deal, you have a shot at maybe getting a Wikipedia page, or maybe. And then if you decide you're going to go free, you're going to go out and you're going to hustle like a motherfucker for your content. And if your this is the one place where the content will speak for itself, because it's not going to sit in a gigantic pile of people, of other people's books unread and perhaps like dying on the vine or whatever. So to me, the central position of the author is his identity must become the most valuable thing. He can publish on Medium, he can publish on his blog, he can publish on Amazon, he can publish a book if he wants to, but fundamentally it's about the name and, oh, I trust that guy, oh, I listen to that guy, I will read anything that he does, and being able to gather those people and then speak to them again. And you can't do that through traditional publishing because they don't know how.
So Mitch is twitching away eagerly. Obviously wants to jump in, but I want to ask you a slightly different question. So in addition to having written good books, these three people have all also launched startups. So I want you to, in 30 seconds, I mean, I consider, you have a
13 years ago was a
13-year-ago startup that's now a very successful social media and marketing agency.
Run it like a startup.
Hugh, Pressbook's the platform for that stuff, and before that, Bite Size Edits, and then Breather. Tell us a little bit, maybe a minute, of what that startup is, and then what I want to find out is how does that color your view of what you think publishers need to do to change themselves? Like if you look at it through the lens of your business and you were handed the reins of a publisher, how would you change? So you want to start with that one?
Yeah, so Twist Image is a digital marketing agency. We've been running it since 2000. We do treat it like a startup. We definitely have that sort of culture, although we're probably considered more of a medium-sized business in the industry that we serve. What was the other part?
How would you? So I hand you the reins to a large publisher. Here's Wiley. What do you do tomorrow?
Well, I don't know if Wiley's a great example for me, but when I look at my publisher, all I sort of see is their ability to. It's two-pronged.
Who's your publisher?
I work with. I'm on Business Plus, which is an imprint of Grand Central, which is part of Hachette, which is the largest book publisher in the world.
So that's a pretty big organization.
These guys are monsters, yeah. And my whole thing with them is just speed to market. Like they just have this not this attitude, it's rightfully so, that their guys, their salespeople go into market and speak to everybody, whether it's iTunes or Amazon or Barnes & Nobles or the independent booksellers. And that process of getting the book slated for, we did ours in May, on this one, so it was sort of summer, to getting them to do it, to then working with the author, to then getting the book published in Asia or wherever and having it shipped. It is a year-long process. It would be nice to see that shrunk. You'd think technology would facilitate that. Doesn't always happen. So that's one thing. I just think speed to market would be better. And that's why I said Wiley's not a great example, because they've actually sort of figured out how to pump books out pretty quickly.
Well, Riley did an ebook that I put out, like very thin one, that was 6 or 7 days speed to market, but the manuscript got held up in approval for a year, like forgotten about. So even when you work out the technology issues, there's always
cultural issues that sort of bump into as well.
Yeah, and my publisher will do 6 or 7 business books a year. I mean, they've got, you know, Dan Rather and mine and Tony Shea and whatever. So they're looking at each project as what can we best do to line this up so that when we hit that button, something can happen. So it's a different attitude than Wiley's, which is if we get a lot of great authors and have them publishing great books, some of them will stick, some of them, it's just different business strategies. So one side is that. The second side for sure is just their ability to help build the platform. So when I first went there in 2008 for my first book, my whole thing was how can we, I was like, let me do digital, you guys do traditional. Like, you get me on the CNNs of the world and the Inc. magazines and Fortune and Forbes, and let me take care of, you know, tech crunches and all that sort of stuff. In 2013, when we did the new one, it was more about how can we better collaborate to make sure we're making the most impact. So they actually moved quite far ahead. But again, I'm talking about a publisher who was just in the news yesterday because of the whole iTunes thing. Like, they're part of that whole issue. So they're
working very closely with Apple.
Yeah, maybe too. So, but it's an interesting world to think about the fact that, you know, the first thing for me is rights. The issue for me is the problem in getting this text out is rights. It's geography. Right. It's like my book is not available in ebook format outside of North America. Every market has to be negotiated. You know, the Russian version will come out in 6 months. Is that your decision or theirs? No, it's just the nature of how publishing works. Rights are driven by geography. So you'd think that, hey, the book is out, pull the trigger. It just doesn't work like that. So there are these sort of little things that if you bring them all together, you would see a more functional business. And I think the way we look at our business when we're doing that is brand, problem, what's the solution? And it turns out we have a lot of tools in our kit that we can use digitally to help a brand propel a different way. They just don't, they're just not there yet. And my concern is, having spent prior to the agency 15 years in the music industry, seeing that go away. And the only thing that the music industry had at the end was the distribution channel that didn't matter anymore.
Well, Mike Rosenthal did a great job this morning of like, here's how OK Go said, we don't care about the music as much, we're going to use the video, and that actually ends up becoming the big source of music, and now you're making Super Bowl commercials, right?
But they you know, OK Go was working with EMI. The ability for EMI to put music in stores was a second, it wasn't relevant. Right. And my concern is that that's what's going to happen to the publishing industry. Right now, people still go to bookstores to buy books, like as digital as everyone is here.
Isn't a bookstore the Amazon show catalog?
No, the majority, especially in this world, business stuff, the majority of those books are sold 100% physically because people like it, they want to share it, they want to show people, so
my vision of the business book is it's the thing the salesperson buys as they're about to miss their quarter in the hopes of keeping their job at the airport, like on a flight home from a bad meeting.
I like those people.
I have a really negative view of publishing. But those are my kind of readers.
So just a comment on what's going to happen with bookstores. So what we're seeing is a lot of the big bookstores are starting to shut down. So in the United States, Barnes & Noble, which is the largest retail, so Borders is already out of business more or less, or completely. Barnes & Noble is starting to shut down stores. So the place where physical books are selling, at least on the large scale, is getting constrained to the Walmarts, et cetera.
It also feels like it's the sort of candy lane of the super, you know, the grocery store. There's like a lane of impulse buys.
Right. So, but if you look at the power of a big publisher and how it relates to the new world right now, that distribution part is still huge. You look at 50 Shades of Grey, which was a self-published fan fiction book. That Random House picked up, so it was probably going to do millions of dollars of sales just as a self-published book. Random House picked it up, and they put it in every single bookstore in the universe, 10 gazillion copies everywhere, and that physical presence ends up being a marketing engine that turns that into a $300 million book. So that power of distribution is still important. Is it going to be important in 10 years is a big question. Going back to your original question, which is what do we do, what does my publisher look like? I think the fundamental answer is...
You didn't tell me what your company does.
Oh, right. So I'll tell you about Pressbooks. It's a online tool that allows you to enter your content in and get out typeset PDF ready to go to the printer.
And it's open source, right?
And it's open source, free to use, and it also makes ebooks that you can send to Amazon and to Kobo and everywhere else that takes ebooks. So the problem we wanted to solve, we wanted that creation of the book, the mechanical creation of a book problem to go away as a problem so that publishers could focus on other kinds of things. And publishers still very much think of themselves as producers of a thing, which is a print unit which is going to be sold, and we happen to have E sitting on top of that. So I think what happens as tools like Pressbooks become more available and as self-publishing grows is that the supply of books goes up and up and up and up and up. And so the fundamental issue that a new publisher has to deal with is what is the right way to aggregate community around the content that we're producing. And I think that's the fundamental challenge. And I don't think, as you alluded to earlier, there are very many publishers who see that as their
So
as their
you're given the keys to Wiley tomorrow. What do you change? Julien cannot wait to answer that one.
Right. I think you start looking at a Huffington Post kind of model where you have tons of publishing happening through your system, but you're picking out the best and promoting that. So
some kind of crowdsourcing, like let people vote with their eyeballs kind of thing.
Yeah. Yes.
All right, Julien.
Okay, so
what's your
before I
startup?
talk about anything, I would like to say, what would I do with Wiley Publishing? The answer is I would do nothing, because they are better at picking up proper content that will sell than any other publisher. You got a blog? How many readers you got? 1,000? Fuck it, it's a book now. Over here, what do you got? You got 100? Are they all going to buy it? Fuck it, it's a book now. That's Wiley. And they do an amazing job at it. And some of them fail, but they get many more hits that they would not have guessed at, including Trust Agents, our book, our first book, as a result of that. Everyone else is like, we'll wait, we'll wait, we'll wait, we'll wait, we'll wait. Without a middleman, without a middle level, almost like you would call it a micro VC of publishing, those people would never get published at all, and hits in those worlds would not exist. So, but the rest of them that are still concerned about being high prestige, they will survive off the quality of the brand for a while, and then they'll just be entirely disassembled by companies like Pressbooks and any other piece that will mechanically remove a part of the process and turn it into a machine, essentially.
Amazon's doing a better job than Pressbooks at that.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Amazon and others will one point in the future have warehouses where they go, this is a fan. Press this button on your phone to buy the fan, and then the fan will be shipped to you. Where the best use of warehouse space will be, oh, here's this thing that you really want to look at before you buy. But it'll be Amazon making the deal, not any actual retail distributor. So, which brings me to space. Like, Breather is an on-demand space company. So when you go to the bookstore, half the time all you want to do is just kind of sit around and get a coffee. Well, Breather is a series, a network of beautiful private places that you can go and just chill and read or whatever, and you can get it all from your phone. So that's the point of it, is there's locked doors that you can just access from anywhere. So the point of how publishing will be remade is it'll be deconstructed. And the people that are at the forefront of that are the people that are selling the ebooks, that are making way more than anyone making a 500K book deal. They're sitting out there selling ebooks for $47, and this is me next to a friend of mine who does this for a living in New York last week, and I was like, so how much did you make in revenue? And he goes, oh, last month, about $500,000. And he's not even in the top 1%. The real 1% of that market is making $10 million a month, and they're selling ebooks because they're using the power of the distribution platform and they have no brand except for personal brand, as opposed to relying on an ancient platform that from 1895 someone gave a shit about, and one time they published 1984, I don't know what, and they're reliant on nothing. They have nothing left, and they're clutching onto it, and they don't have the manpower or the intelligence to try and create the future. They're simply reacting to the future. And that's the primary problem. As authors, we have to create the future, not react to the future.
So I think I get the point as the author, right? There's one vision of publishing, which is we don't need this thing in the middle. So we're going to rip it out because we don't need travel agents either, right? It's the publishing tool and the content at the end. There's another view that says that's the role of curation. As you said, there's a taste making. If you're doing a few books with intention, there's another rule which is like let the masses sort it out, sort of crowd voting, HuffPo, like let's see what bubbles up. There's another view which is, well, I'm not sure what that was, but a lot of years in there. So, but this idea that it's about the personal brand, and if you understand that and you focus on it and take advantage of these existent platforms, you can separate so much the middlemen that you and the channel that you can get by a lot of revenue certainly on royalties as an author, I get a fraction of royalties. My entire advance for Lean Analytics, we put the whole thing into, travel to South by to launch it, design of a blog, sweepstakes for someone to come here in return for buying the book, all kinds of stuff. Our entire advance went to that. It's the only reason we sold books. We were hustling, right? But we didn't do this to make any money. And then we do one workshop, not the one yesterday we did that for free, but we'll do a paid workshop and make more than our entire advance. So economics are totally different.
One more point very quickly. What do you pay for a book? Answer, if it's a hardcover, $30.
Right.
If it's a paperback, maybe $15. Now tell me what you pay for an ebook. The answer is whatever the fuck they decide they want to charge for it, because it simply is not in physical form. And the separation from the physical form actually creates a better business model. So do you have any doubt whatsoever that the entire world is going to become like this? It's crazy. It's literally people leaving money on the table over and over and over again because of supposed prestige. It's crazy, and it will disappear. Get used to it.
So if you're a startup and you're looking at this, I mean, Hugh, we were in Tools of Change in New York talking about the book as API, which I thought was really interesting. If the book is this API, maybe you can explain that idea a little bit, then how do startups take advantage of that API to create sort of the new ecosystem, the new value add around it?
So I think the big thing is that the model of publishing a unit of content, and when your main business model is selling as many units as you can of that content, that is slowly going to go away. We're seeing that in every media business, that is not a model that's sustainable in the long run.
Wait, but I'm going to challenge you there. The top 40 radio, it used to be a song in heavy rotation was played every 4 hours. Today, a song in heavy rotation is played every 55 minutes. If anything, the lesson of the recording industry is that we've hit a less long tail, where you have like top 40 pop that gets manufactured. But the shape of that tail changes a lot.
No, but you also have more channels. So you don't have fewer channels, right? So there's that. That's happening too.
So I want to understand, you said you're going to sell fewer of things.
I said that the selling of a unit of content as an individual atomized thing is going to
like
go
the
away.
book.
The book,
okay.
Right. And so if you look at your model, for instance, where it turns out that what people want is not to buy the book, the unit of the book, but something bigger around that, which is the knowledge that comes with it, and what do you build, whether it's workshops or other kinds of content that...
well, we're looking at Udemy, and those guys are like, $200 a video, just, hey, here, have videos. Go watch a video of us presenting on Lean Analytics for 6 hours, that's $200. For any author in the world that doesn't make a slide deck when they write their book, they're a freaking moron, right?
Maybe. I just think at the end of the day, people will still want to buy a book. I'm not disagreeing with any of this. I think
I think you just did, actually.
It's not a zero-sum game. I think some people may want that. Some people may want whatever Julien was saying. I think there will be a vast majority of people who enjoy the process of a topic that has depth, that has length, that has a thought process put into it that you have to sort of do over time, that somebody took the time to create over a longer period of time than a tweet or a blog post or an article in Huffington Post, and that exercise will stimulate people and have them want to either escape in a story or learn something. So,
well, it does feel like Wiley, if I go surf the web, I'm pulling content. So I'm going to ask you questions about you, and I say, what's your name, what's your age, what's your sign, whatever, as opposed to tell me about yourself, where you have narrative control.
Well, it's not only that, but when there's something big comes along, you bookmark it, or you send it to yourself,
right.
or you print it, and you go, well, I can't do that now, because now I'm in the sort of middle of this flow. Books are a completely different contextual experience. They are what I call a passive media versus an active platform, which would be the internet and the mobile. So I do think that consumers don't want one or the other. Like I keep saying, I don't want a book with a bunch of video links and audio feeds. Like I want to finish the thing. I want to get through a big piece of work and consume it.
So
I hear so.
Yeah,
I agree with you that the unit still is important, but as the fundamental metaphor of the business model of book publishing, I think that's going to start to go away.
Julien, would you like a book that had video links and stuff embedded in it or not?
Yeah, but that's
Hang on, I want to... No, why not? Isn't
that's
more,
that's
isn't
the
more,
wrong question.
Give him a microphone. Be nice.
Because the book as a unit, although it can be broken down, still has an inherent value. A great example from publishing is like publishing war stories. They go, your book needs to be 50 pages longer. And we go, okay, you guys are the publishers, why? And they say, because it needs to be thicker when you put it on the bookshelf so people can see the title And you're saying to me, I need to write 50 more pages of content so my book is half an inch thicker. It makes no sense. None of it makes any sense, but it makes sense inside that Stockholm Syndrome world that Mitch is in, where he is literally held hostage by the system, so he can no longer, just like I can't talk bad about VCs because I'm funded by VCs. So it's like,
they're all scumbags.
you're in a world where you have to look at the future and just go, if I started from zero here today, how would I get to a good place as fast as possible? And the shot at becoming Malcolm Gladwell, sorry, it's not going to happen to you. It's just not. And so it's going to happen to Mitch, so it's not going to happen to you.
You don't have the crazy hair, right? So there's one guy with no hair, one guy with lots of hair, that's it.
So in the meantime, go out there and do the work necessary to get your content out there in the way that works.
And this, I guess this is the thing to me, is that there's this tipping point of, like, blogging until a certain audience size is pure narcissism, right? And there's a tipping point where it becomes, well, somewhat less narcissistic. I mean, I've still read your blog, but there's a point where it's somewhat less. But I have no freaking readers, so like I'm just writing to the world. Hey, look, I wrote this, so that 3 years later I can be smug and say I thought of it first. See this post, and that's the entire benefit of writing stuff, right?
It's a sad life, Alistair.
There is so many layers. It's an onion of sadness.
But no, look, where I'm trying to get to is a point where people understand that there is not sort of the one answer does this. I blog for a very different reason. I like to publish. I like to put my thoughts out into the world. I'm a journalist who used to pitch editors all day and get told someone else is writing that. We're not interested in that. And a blog was, the canary being let free. I could now, oh, you don't like that? Publish. Like, I can figure out whether or not there's an audience that likes the content.
How does that jive with the role of an editor as the curator of content?
Well, it depends what type of publishing you're trying to create, and that's my point. Like, I don't need an editor to curate and edit my tweets or my blog. I can handle that.
Says you.
Or you, actually. But, however, I do appreciate Sarah at Harvard Business Review, who takes the time to think about what I'm trying to do in the construct of what fits the HBR reader.
Sure.
Much in the same way that I really respect the editor at my publishing house, because he's actually a great editor and spends time with me, helping me, point me in directions, almost like, a little detective, go over here, try that, what about this?
So in that case, they're the holder of context for the particular medium or audience that
if
you're
they're
going
great,
out to, right?
I mean, I think the problem that we're talking about here isn't everyone's problem. Like, I don't have the issues you guys are talking about. Like, I actually, again, I'm not showing up, I got a great advance, and it was a great reason to write a book, and I could just have done that, and life would have been grand.
So what I'm trying to understand is, if you have a model like that, like if you had a publisher that had a huge audience of 1 million people who are just going to buy the 5 books they put out each year. It's kind of like the TED thing, right? We're going to mail you your TED books. You're just going to get them, right? In that case, you've got like the Chris Anderson that's saying, these are the books we're going to send out because we know our audience. And that's a different kind of publisher that's very, I am the voice, I speak for the audience, for they have no voice kind of thing.
And have done a fantastic job of aggregating their audience and knowing how to push the books in.
And that's emphatically not a traditional publisher. That's like an audience aggregator and spokesperson, right?
But that's always been what a good publisher has to do. Otherwise, they're not a good publisher. Otherwise, they're not going to survive as a business. I mean, if an author can sell more on their own than the publisher fundamentally adds no value.
I have people coming up to me all the time. I get emails and tweets. I can't, your book is everywhere, that type of thing. I couldn't have done that on my own. And whether it's people, when I say that, people go, oh, you mean in Barnes & Nobles? No, I mean like even on iTunes. I mean even in Amazon Digital, the stuff, the things that they knew and know about how to get that book to be bigger than I could with just my blog audience. So I think you're right that you have a platform of 1,000 or 5,000 people. They look at it and they go, wow, that's a good platform. But my whole thing isn't that. My whole thing is, how do you take that platform and now introduce Mitch and Ctrl-Alt-Delete or whatever it is to audiences that I don't have access to. I don't have access to the guy who's running through the airport on a flight to SFO and wants a book. I don't have access to the ability to tell Barnes & Nobles when someone walks in, they see what's new and interesting, for Mitch's bright orange book to be right there. They can do that. They provide a gateway. Now, people might say the gateway is going away. I think the gateway becomes digital. Like, I don't know how my book on iTunes Books was front and center. I don't know how Indigo started promoting the way they did, but they did.
Tell me briefly about the cover. So Mitch's book is like big and orange with black letters. It's impossible to miss, right? How did you have to tell them to make it look like that?
No, I saw that cover, and these guys can attest. I was like, this sucks. And it took me months and months to sort of think about what is coming in terms of book design. It was all 100% them. I was fighting against it. I thought it was a terrible
I talked to Patrick and Brent, and they wanted a cover that was recognizable. Right. And the authors, the publishers were like, that they were talking to were like, no, it's got to look this way. And it turns out that makes it almost illegible and unrecognizable in, the thumbnail format,
so that's
right?
different. Again, my guys are working with major book designer guys, right. And I actually love the cover now, and I think it's amazing. And the testimony to that is, I'll get people saying like, "I love that book cover," and I'm like, "Wow, it shows you what I know. If it would have been mine, I wouldn't have done that."
If you recognize the digital channel, you're going to change your design. Whereas I've talked to publishers who resist changing design, and they're doing the same, make it thicker so it fits on a bookshelf, and you're going, could you make the fonts bigger so you can see it in iTunes, right?
But that was the big thing too with this book. What I realized after is, you can see it from 60 miles away in a bookstore, but you'll also see it pop off your screen on Amazon or whatever, right. And that's when I realized I get what they're doing. Like, it made more sense to me, but they were very smart about it, I thought.
So the future of publishing is bright colored books, high contrast fonts, 10 letters or less.
Do whatever you want. Mine's out now. Do whatever you want.
Okay. That's right. All right. We have time for a couple of questions. Then I'm going to ask you guys what you think the next biggest advance in publishing will be in the next couple of years. So, any of you have questions for these guys? Yeah. Hey, Patrick, let's talk about. We should have been up here yelling about publishing too.
Actually, I hear the question. So we use the term change.
Yeah. I mean,
digital ink versus an interactive object.
Here, come talk to Hugh about what is a book. He loves that conversation. It's like my head starts hurting. If you want to go down that rabbit hole, where you inevitably will wind up is everything is either text, images, audio, or video. I would recommend you don't do that. That would be my general thing. So I do think that when you buy a book, you can buy it digitally that you can read on your Kobo or your Kindle. I do think that children's books digitally can be very different. You can pet the cat and it'll purr and it'll show you videos. You could do things with it. But don't dismiss the fact that some people will want to use their digital devices to purely read a book that is formatted in a way that makes it easier for them to read. So I'm just the guy who doesn't believe in zero-sum games. This is dead, this is gone. I think you'll see many iterations of what literature and books will look like in digital formats. Some of them will look nothing like a book as you define it. It will look more like a live animation with words.
We just saw it. It's called Twitter. They're all pieces of the longest possible piece of content is the book. If it gets longer, what is it? It's still a book. So the answer is the longest piece of content is a book. The smallest piece of content is retained by the distribution platform, which up until this point was paper. But now it is no longer paper, so it moved to the smallest possible unit again, which is the tweet. It's not going smaller than that unless it goes straight to our brain. Or maybe it's the text, same thing. So everything will move and go to its natural conclusion now that the friction has been removed from the distribution channel. So different pieces. Medium is the new magazine article. Go there. It's like Pinterest, but in textual format. Every little piece will move towards its natural place. That's just the way it's going to go.
And I think you're right that we're at a transitional period where what we've done with ebooks is tried very hard to replicate what paper looks like in ebook format, which I think has done something very good. But because actually to consume long content, ebooks do a very good job of keeping our attention that same kind of way. But we've hampered a lot of the kinds of things that you expect with digital content, whether it's interaction or commenting or the ability to link from one ebook to another ebook or whatever it is. This stuff is going to start appearing in ebooks, either in those ebook platforms, or we're going to start to see more book-length publishing happening elsewhere, just on the web, where we don't have any rules about what Kindle supports.
Big titles.
Okay, Mitch, we're out of time, so finish up with what do you think is the biggest advance you're going to see in publishing in the next 3 years?
I don't even know what it is, because I looked at YouTube when it first came out and thought, this sucks. Like a 2x2 screen and it's buffering, this is terrible. So I'm the worst person to ask, but I do believe that this idea of everybody being able to publish instantly in a connected world is going to profoundly change and will introduce newer things. So the thing I tell you to look at is I would look at things like Vine and Instagram 15 seconds and look at the top Viners and what they're creating. And you tell me if that's not a new art form or a new form of publishing. So that gets me really excited.
Cool. And we're not going to talk, we don't have time to talk about the interactive edition of 50 Shades of Grey, so we'll leave that for the next panel.
Hugh and Julien will interact it later.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Have a great festival.